Hello YouTube T-Rexes, I'm Sean Stoker and this is Crazy Native Philosophy. I'm honored to talk today about the greatest mentor that I've ever had. Today's video is called My Mentor, Good Boy. Now my greatest mentor, his American name was Rick Cliff, or is Rick Cliff. He was born in a one-room log cabin with a dirt floor, no electricity, and no running water on the Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana. Rick is a Assiniboine in Nakota, and his Nakota name is Hokshinawashte, which means good boy or good son. I mostly called him Cliff because we are both combat veterans and soldiers wear their last names on their uniforms. And so we are used to being called by our last names. So, plus back then, he was physically chiseled out of granite and he was bench pressing over 315. So I'd been out of the Army for a few years, and I was a student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus when Rick Cliff showed up, and he was finishing up his 20 years of military service as an ROTC instructor on campus. Cliff was a tank platoon sergeant during the war, and I was an infantry grunt. So there were only two other Native veterans on campus at the time. One was a Navy veteran who liked to chop me down every chance he could get, and the other was another Army infantry veteran that I never saw sober. So I don't really remember the exact first time I met Hokshinawashte, but I think he came to a Wungshik meeting. Now Wungshik is the Ho-Chunk word for a human being, and that was the name of the American Indian student organization on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. So its history goes back to the 1970s. And if I remember right, when we met, he said he was an ROTC instructor on campus, and we got talking Army, and that was that, right? It was immediately apparent that Cliff was the most traditional guy that I ever met. He knew more about historic culture and old ways and ceremonies and doing things than anyone I'd come across in Wisconsin. And he was from the Oceti Sakowin, or the Seven Council Fires, which is better known to most people in America as the Great Sioux Nation. Now in Wisconsin, I was really a fish out of water. I was completely disconnected from my tribe. And I love all tribes in Wisconsin, and this is my home, but I never tried to adopt their ways as my own. Right? And instead, I chose to stand alone and try to connect with my own ancestral ways however I could. So now I was no longer alone. Tankashala had sent me Hokshinawashte. Now I can't begin to cover or even remember everything that he taught me over the years that he mentored me. But it's all branded in my subconscious. So in a way, every video that I make for this channel has some of Hokshinawashte's teachings and wisdom and knowledge and humor and love in it. I tried to be around him and listen to him and hang out with him and watch him interact with others and listen to their conversations when it was appropriate and learn everything and anything I possibly could and as much as I possibly could from him. Not only did Good Boy teach me tons about traditional ways and Native philosophy, but at the time, I was also a catastrophe as a human being. On top of teaching me all this stuff, Rick Cliff was also like my therapist and my confidant and is probably my best friend during some of those, probably the most brutal times of my life. Cliff and I were like this two-man team in the middle of the Native population in Madison, Wisconsin. And when we'd be at Native social events or educational events or whatever, we would hang back and Hokshinawashte would explain things to me or we would talk about it later. So he understood things in a deeper way and in ways that other people didn't seem to really know about. So he'd use a lot of these social events as teaching tools and give me tons more insight. Now Rick Cliff said to me early on that he said, "You've earned the right to call yourself a warrior because you're a combat veteran and that's how you live your life." And that's probably the greatest compliment I've ever got in my whole life. Cliff also said that as a combat veteran, I had the right to run sweat lodges and make and carry a sacred pipe, to give people names, and to do other ceremonies. Now, other medicine men have said similar things to me, but if only Rick Cliff had said that to me, that would have been good enough, because, like I said, to this day, he's been the greatest teacher I've ever had. Even though he told me I'd earned the right to do these things, for almost 20 years, I never did. And I definitely don't think of myself or call myself a warrior. One piece of wisdom that Hokushin Washde dropped on me very early on was, he said, a very good warrior will take many arrows in this life. Now, I thought about that for a long time. Now, a warrior stands between his people and the enemy. So when the arrows fly, they hit the warrior instead of hitting the people who are behind him. And if you have the heart of a warrior, you realize that you will gladly take 1,000 arrows before you would see a single arrow even nick, someone that you care about, your family or your tribe, or even some smelly homeless guy on the street you don't even know. So as a warrior, you realize your life really means nothing. It's the people's lives that mean everything. But Indian country can be a cold and ruthless place. So part of this whole taking arrows business means that a great warrior also takes them in the back. So back in the 1990s, the tribal chairman of the Cheyenne River Lakota tribe in South Dakota had a painting on his wall, right? And it was behind his desk, and this old warrior, and it had 7 arrows in his back. And below that painting, it said, "My people are all behind me." So this is the deeper meaning of Good Boy's teaching, right? A true warrior can take 1,000 arrows in the back from his own people, and he will still rise and charge the enemy. So Rick Cliff is a quiet, unassuming man, and without a doubt, he has that kind of strength that silently radiates out of him like the summer sun. I think about how warriors used to take 1,000 arrows and rise and charge forward. But today, in our modern society, some people are devastated by words, right? I also see many great fighters and people who put on the uniform, but real warriors are few and far between. I also don't agree with a lot of these people in Indian country calling themselves warriors. Like I've seen, warrior lawyers or warrior artists. So a Native Art magazine where they call themselves Native artists, or warrior artists, right? But part of being a warrior means you train for warfare, and I don't call myself a soldier cook because I really can't cook that well. So or a chef, I wouldn't call myself a chef because I'm not trained that way. So I disagree with all these people who are not trained in warfare calling themselves warriors. I'll discuss Native warriorhood later in future videos, but you got to be batshit crazy to take 1,000 arrows from your own people and 1,000 arrows from the enemy and still charge forward. And most people I know won't even take one. So they just want to be seen as a warrior. And it's all about image, right? They don't even have the slightest trace of heart to rise and face death, right? You don't face death as an artist or an attorney. That's not part of that profession. Whereas warrior profession, that is what you do. That is part of the job description, right? So what I tell young warriors today is a great warrior looks like a porcupine. I was always taught that whatever a person says about themselves means nothing. It's what your tribe says about you or what the people around you say about you. And that tells you who you are. and what you do or your place in the circle. So any joker can stand up and say, I'm the president of the United States, right? But that doesn't make it so. If everyone around you points to you and says, that woman is a healer, or that guy is a warrior, then that is what those people are. Your tribe is what defines you. And this is why anyone who says that they are a medicine man, or they are a warrior, or they're amazingly humble, or they are very generous or whatever, you should steer very clear of them. It's all just an expression of their ego, and that means they aren't even a fraction of what they claim themselves to be. Now, Hokushin Washday told me this story about when he was a young man, and he wanted to learn from medicine men too, just like I did. So one day he went to see this very powerful medicine man, and Cliff was really eager to learn the old ways from this guy. So it was his intention to be this medicine man student. So when Hokushin Washday got there, he sat down and started telling the old man everything he knew. He kept going on and on about all the stuff that he'd already learned. And he told that medicine man everything he knew about traditional stuff and old ways and ceremonies and all of it. And Cliff said he talked to him for maybe a couple of hours. And finally, when Rick was all done talking, that medicine man goes, yep, I guess you got it all figured out. And that was that, right? The old guy didn't say another word. So Cliff got up and left. Now, for you non-natives, Western education at this point would do some kind of explanatory debrief, and I would sit here and pull all these lessons out for you. And then I would look out at the blank faces of my students and wonder why everyone's not talking more in class, right? The native way of education is I tell that story about young Hokushin Washday going to see this powerful medicine man, and you find the meaning in that story, and you find the lessons for yourself. And if you learn anything, or how much you learn, that's your responsibility. And that's the difference between native and Western education. So now I like to say that I'm a philosopher with the mind of a scientist, and by that I mean I'm naturally skeptical, but I'm also very curious and open to having my views changed. So I like to see and experience things for myself. And I'm saying this because I do not generally believe in a lot of this hippie, new age, spirituality, Harry Potter, psychic voodoo stuff, right? That some people will really get into. However, I have seen and experienced things in my life that I absolutely cannot explain by scientific or rational explanation. So when other people bring up psychic ability, I'm almost always cringe. And that is because this is one of those areas where people immediately dive down the rabbit hole into some tripped out fantasy land and do not really understand what's going on. So I'm highly skeptical whenever someone starts bringing up psychic ability. However, I have personally experienced things that I can only describe as psychic phenomena. And again, I have no explanation or in-depth understanding of this, but I have experienced it with a sober and rational state of mind, and I do not negate my own experience. Just because I can't explain it with science or rational logic, that doesn't wash away what I've experienced. So with that, I'll say that I believe Rick Cliff had some psychic ability. So some of you, especially you hardcore military veterans and on-the-job police officers, are probably rolling your eyes at the ceiling right now. But bro, hear me out, right? Is this any different from combat instincts or spidey senses, as some units call them, where you just know something is about to jump off with zero indicators present, or you just know where a subject has hidden something or where someone is hiding with no indicators? How does that happen, right? Now, Gavin de Becker, he proposes that It's the subconscious mind picking up indicators on a person or in the environment that our conscious mind has not been able to comprehend, and therefore the body interprets these signals as a feeling. Now, I like that theory a lot, but what if there are no indicators? And you still get that feeling, right? So I've come to see the psychic ability as not supernatural, like all these movies and TVs and books and that would have you believe, right? It's not like superhero stuff. I see it as natural ability. It's something that everyone has to some degree of it, and some have more of it than others, right? Kind of like the sense of hearing. There are some people who are born with like unbelievable hearing, and there are some people who are born deaf, and everybody else is just born with hearing somewhere in between. So your hearing can be developed to a degree. Like, for example, musicians may not specifically be born with any better level of hearing than anybody else, but they have trained their hearing to such a high level within the physical limits that they have, just because of their training and their capability. Now, Rick Cliff's psychic ability, or what I will call natural mental ability, was he could read my mind. And I mean, he always seemed to know exactly what I was thinking. And he was always like 12 moves ahead, like a chess grandmaster. There were times I thought I was super slick and I would totally outfox him, and nope. Cliff was always 1,000 yards ahead and grinning ear to ear. So this just didn't happen every once in a while. It happened all the time. It happened so much and with such precision that the only way I can describe it is to say that Hokshinawashte could read my mind. And if he is watching this right now, he is probably laughing his ass off, and I imagine him saying something like, "That's because you were so easy, right?" So here's an example. So Cliff and I talked a ton about medicine men, and over the years that we were together, and we talked about what they did and how they did it and who they were as people and on and on. And we had talks like this all the time because it obviously was very interesting to both of us. So there was this phase where during all of this, when Cliff starts talking about the gift, and he keeps mentioning the gift, the gift, the gift, the gift, the gift, the gift, right? And as I stated earlier, he would never explain this. So I had to figure it out for myself. And so after a few months, I started getting kind of a fuzzy idea of what this kind of meant. And then one day, I called up Rick, and we're talking away on the phone, and again, he's going on and on about the gift. And by this point, I've been learning a lot, and I'm getting kind of itchy, So I want to figure out. So I figure I'm gonna put it out there, and but I just can't come right out and ask if I have the gift or not, right? So I got to do this in a humble and respectful and make it seem like it naturally came up in a conversation. And so we're talking away, but meanwhile, I'm slowly circling in for the kill, right? And all of a sudden, I spot my opening to take my shot. But remember, I got to do this smooth and subtle and humble and respectful and real nonchalant like that. So I say to Hokshinawashte, I'm like real slick, like I'm like, so Cliff, I want to know if I have the gift. And like a freaking bullet, he shoots back, and he was just waiting for it, and he's like, "Why do you want to know if you have the gift?" And I'm like totally, my brain went totally flatline, right? I couldn't say nothing, I couldn't think nothing. I was stunned, speechless. He must have said something, or I must have said something, and all of a sudden, I kind of woke up and the conversation was going. So to any outsider, this might sound like nothing, and maybe you really had to be there, but it was like he knew what I was thinking all along. And things like this happened almost daily, right? So it was beyond unusual. But now I'm going to add more to this story. So later I thought heavily about this conversation. And first I was really stunned that Cliff yet again was 12 moves ahead. And second, I realized that the only reason I really wanted to know if I had the gift was pure ego, right? It was either so I could reassure myself or so I could puff my chest out to the world. And which of those it was, it doesn't even matter. It all boiled down to ego. And that's when I truly found the gift. And now I'm going to give it to you. So I realized it didn't matter if I had the gift or not. And it doesn't matter now. I'm not going to live my life any different if I do have it or if I don't have it. I'm going to help anyone who comes to me and asks for help. And what am I going to do if I don't have the gift? Well, I'm going to help anyone who comes to me and asks for help. So ultimately, you realize it has nothing to do with you anyways. It's about them, and it's about the Creator. So it really doesn't matter if Tankashala gives you the gift or not. Who cares? It doesn't change anything. I'm going to keep living my life like all these guys I love and respect so much. And I'm going to learn all I can and help no matter what. So really the gift is, there is no gift, right? There's just you committing the rest of your life to always being a helper and letting Tankashala, or the Great Spirit, do all the rest. And that's it. That's the big secret. So now I'll tell you about this time that made me think that Cliff was a Heyoka, right? Now Heyoka is like a thunder dreamer or a sacred clown or a contrary person. And I'll get into that later. So during those years, I was suffering from PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury. I had rage issues. I had alcohol control issues. I had identity issues. And then I had military separation issues. And I was compensating by trying to absorb as much traditional knowledge and experience as I possibly could. All of this on top of trying to get an education, a college education. And this often made me feel like I was going crazy. And I mean like batshit crazy. So Cliff mentored me and coached me and guided me through all of this. And now I totally understand why I felt like I was going crazy. And this is where our story starts. So one day we're on the back porch of the old Wang Shik office. The old office was above Brothers Bar on the corners of Lake Street and University Avenue. And it's been long since torn down. But behind the bar were these old gray wooden steps that creaked and wiggled whenever you stepped on them, and this walkway, the wooden walkway with the same gray wood that went to our back door. And every time we stepped on those stairs or the walkway, we were sure that we were going to fall through to our death, right? It was like 30 feet off the ground. And I used to smoke cigarettes back then, and I went outside the Wang Shik office to smoke, and Cliff came with me, as he often did. And I told him about this intense pressure that was driving me mad and ready to explode out of me, and it was unbearable. I felt like a leaf in a hurricane. I couldn't figure out which direction to go or what to do with my life, and I felt like I was literally going insane. The pressure inside me was unbearable. And I was explaining all this to the greatest mentor I've ever had in my entire life. And finally, I just straight up said, "Cliff, I feel like I'm going crazy." And I swear he was reading my mind, and he looked at me grinning ear to ear again, and he goes, "Go crazy then." He goes, "It's natural. It's part of life. People go crazy all the time. Why not you?" And he's, looking at me with that grin, and my brain again went totally flatline. I was expecting him to drop some heavy-ass wisdom on me and pull me back from that ledge, but instead he tells me to go ahead and jump, right? So Hokushin Washite did stuff like this to me like several times every week, and my brain wouldn't function. Like after he said that, I don't even know what happened next. but he told me to go crazy. And so I eventually gave up and went crazy. And which also goes to another teaching of his. He was constantly telling me to let it go. And I didn't know what he really meant by that, but now I do. So I used to walk around thinking about stuff so intensely that people would often say I looked angry, right? I was always really focused. Quite a few people used to tell me I was too serious all the time. So the one thing that made me feel like I was going crazy was I couldn't figure out which direction to go in my life. And yes, I had all these issues going on, and I was trying to get through school, and plus I had extracurricular activities, and I was working jobs to help pay for my college life. But all of that put together it's a tremendous amount. But it was this lack of direction that completely washed away all of it, and it consumed me. It felt like I was in the middle of this giant tug of war that was pulling me back and forth, like every day, all day, relentlessly. It just would not stop. And I couldn't decide which way to go. And one day, Hokushin Day pulled out a sheet of paper and drew a giant letter Y on it, right? And if I close my eyes, I can still picture that sheet of paper exactly, perfectly. So Cliff told me that I was at that split in the Y, like in that, right at the fork there. And on the one path was all the stuff that he and my other mentor, Robert Lujan, had been teaching me. And the other branch of this Y diagram was the path of warfare. And I could not choose. I kept flip-flopping back and forth. Every second of every day for years, it felt like I was literally driving me insane. All of these other teachings kept coming to me about the same time, and they kept telling me the exact same thing. Someone showed me a photograph of one of the oldest wampum belts in existence, and that was from their tribal nation's history. And they told me the story behind that belt was you can never ride two canoes across a river. So if you try to do this, you're going to end up falling in and being wet. So again, this was telling me that I had to choose between the war path and the traditional path. So a good friend of mine from their tribe's medicine society shared a different story with a similar teaching. And I'll give you kind of a generalized overview. So this happened before colonizers arrived on Turtle Island. And basically there was this really strong warrior that the medicine society observed, and they wanted to have him come in and be a member. But the warrior kept turning them down until finally one day they asked him for the fourth time, and then he accepted. So here again was Hokushin Day's Y. And like this warrior way back in the day, I could not give up the war path. But this other path was pulling at me so strong too, and I was stuck in the middle, and I was going crazy, and I couldn't decide. So one day, Hokushin Day, my buddy Chris Touton, and this guy that Cliff knew by the name of Jamie Windy Boy, who was passing through Madison, we were going to have a pipe ceremony. So Rick told me and Chris that we are going to do this at the old Wangshik office. Now Rick and Jamie talked amongst themselves like they were old colleagues, right? And you could see the fire burning in each one a little brighter because they were feeding each other, like their energy was feeding each other. As we prepared the chanupa to smoke, Hokushin Day said to us, "You guys always pray for everyone else. Today, you're going to pray for what you need in this life." Now, I felt really awkward doing this. I was taught to never pray for myself and to always pray for other people. So it felt really weird and awkward and like I was being selfish and greedy. So I once heard an elder say that the chanupa, or the sacred pipe, was like a direct walkie-talkie to Tankashala, or the Great Spirit. And I've been to many pipe ceremonies before, but this time it was different. It was just the four of us, and the vibe was really strong. It was just different, right? When it was my turn, I began praying with that pipe so hard. I needed direction in my life, and every day I was being ripped apart. I prayed so hard I could feel the blood moving through my body, and it felt like I put everything I possibly had inside of myself into that prayer. I prayed so hard, like Tankashla, I just need direction. Please give me some direction. Just give me some direction. I just need some direction, right? And I kept praying like that. And just like that, I heard a little voice back. And I have never been more astounded in my entire life. It was not some big, booming, thunderous Hollywood type voice that they always make when the creator or God says something in the movies. This was a very small, feeble little voice that simply said, "You have direction, you just don't see it." So of course, Sean being Sean, the first thing that pops into my head is, well, thanks a lot, you know? And then I realized I just told the creator, thanks for nothing, right? So now I was praying even harder, like, please forgive me. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. And I was totally embarrassed. I don't know if anyone else in the room even knew what was going on, but I was just this stupid, dumb kid, you know, that was praying to the creator, and I heard a voice answer back, and then I told the creator it wasn't good enough. I mean, who does that, right? Just me. So Rick introduced me to Robert Lujan, and from a number of months, there was, I think it was a spring semester, so it was all spring and then through summer. And there was some overlap where both men mentored me together. And then Rick moved to Kansas to be near his grown kids and work at Haskell, which is a Native American college located in Lawrence, Kansas. And he still works there to this day. So after he left, you know, the global war on terror started. So I say that, you know, that Tankashla started that entire war, so that way I wouldn't have to choose between the two paths. And so I went back in the Army for my third enlistment. So Haudenosaunee Day said many times, we are given knowledge and power to pass on to others. And if we don't pass these on, they stagnate inside of us and die. So this saying is one of the foundational building blocks for my starting this YouTube channel. He also said, what's the point of learning things if you don't use it? So this is why I'm passing all of this on to you young ones. This stuff isn't mine, right? I'm not some super genius, right? These things were given to me by amazing, generous, caring, selfless men with exceptional hearts, and they wanted to see you live a better tomorrow. These were the teachings that were given to them by their mentors, and now they're given to you. So you can walk away from this entertained, or you can walk away different at the very core of your being. You know, you can work to make this a better world for the generation that follows you, or you can do nothing and allow greed and consumptive addiction to extinguish our species. It's your choice, but eventually you'll see that there really is no choice. Aho, Matakesi.